Across the 70s, Rush established themselves as one of the leaders of the progressive rock sound, writing expansive songs with complex lyrics and musical explorations. But at the start of the 80s, the band encapsulated their complex musical ideas and progressive sounds into one of the most iconic classic rock tracks of all time. Tom Sawyer. Hi, it's Warren Hewitt here. Hope you're doing marvellously well. Welcome back to another episode in the series. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified when we have a new video. And if you're into production, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. Rush were formed in Toronto in 1968 when childhood friends, guitarist Alex Lifeson and drummer John Rutsey decided to form a band with another local teenager, Jeff Jones. But when Jones missed the newly named band's second gig, Lifeson enlisted the help of schoolmate Gary Weinrib to take over lead vocals and bass for the performance. Weinrib ended up remaining with the group, adopting the stage name of Geddy Lee. The band went through several lineups over the next several years, as they toured locally and struggled to obtain a record deal. They formed their own record label, Moon Records, and recorded their first single, a cover of the Buddy Holly song Not Fade Away in 1973. The band's self-titled first album was released in March of 1974 and caught both the attention of the Canadian public and Mercury Records. Shortly after signing with Mercury, Rutsey left the band, a void which was quickly and iconically filled by Neil Peart. In addition to his skills as a drummer, Peart brought his talents as a lyricist. His style of writing matched perfectly with the increasingly complex musical material explored by his bandmates. Lee told UGO Entertainment, "Our tastes got more obscure. We discovered more progressive rock-based bands like Yes, Van der Graaf Generator, and King Crimson. And we were very inspired by those bands. They made us want to make our music more interesting and more complex. And we tried to blend that with our own personalities to see what we could come up with that was indisputably us." The band explored a wide range of sound, topics, and even song lengths as the band rose in popularity across the decade. However, it wasn't until 1981, with the release of their 8th studio album, Moving Pictures, and its opening track, Tom Sawyer, that Rush were able to break into massive worldwide success. Tom Sawyer blended together the band's complex creative impulses into a 4.5-minute rock classic, becoming a staple of not only the band's career, but also a defining track of the classic rock canon. Tom Sawyer employed the creative compositional talents of all three of Rush's members, Lee, Peart, and Lifeson, in collaboration with lyricist Pye Dubois. The band had met Dubois through the band Max Webster, with whom they had recently recorded the song Battle Scar. Lifeson recalled their friendship between both the bands at the time. "Those guys were big friends of ours, but Pye was a little mysterious, kind of a strange fellow. He was very quickly a bit of a nut, but he did write great lyrics. And around 1980, he sent a poem to Neil with an idea to collaborate on a song. The original draft was called Louis the Warrior." Dubois' poem, based on the 1876 Mark Twain classic The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, inspired Peart to look inward, crafting a new draft which added an autobiographical element to the story. Peart explained in 1985, his original lyrics were kind of a portrait of a modern-day rebel, a free-spirited individualist striding through the world wide-eyed and purposeful. I added the themes of reconciling the boy and the man in myself, and the difference between what people are and what others perceive them to be, namely me, I guess. With the setting set in text for the song, the members of Rush began exploring different musical sounds to accompany it. Although the final product is a tightly composed creation, it developed in a completely new way for the band. Lifeson explained, "A lot of the material for that record was written off the floor. That was certainly the case with Tom Sawyer. We were rehearsing in a little farm outside of Toronto. Half the barn was a garage, and half was a small rehearsal space. We would typically just go in and jam and develop songs that way. The melody for the song actually came from some improvisations, which Lee would play on his Oberheim OBX synthesizer during sound checks. The synth is also how he achieved the song's iconic growl sound. The song's sparse opening juxtaposed the synthesizer against Pert's hard-hitting drums, showcasing Lee's incredible vocal power. Lifeson said the choice was intentional. On Tom Sawyer, the synthesizer is such a key part of that song, there is a good integration between the three of us and the keyboards. We still had that trio feel. Plus, we always felt that we had to replicate each song as faithfully as possible when we played it live. So Tom Sawyer was written in that way. There was no rhythm guitar under the guitar solo or anything like that.
Monday warrior, mean strike. Today's Tom Sawyer, mean.
The first instrumental section of the song transitions into the unusual realm of a 7/8 time signature, bringing in the added complexity which had defined the band in the years leading up to Moving Pictures. Pert explained to CBC that this iconic moment was largely improvised. The drum is so detailed, but when I got into the middle of the odd time part, it was improvised. I got lost, and I punched my way out of it and somehow came back to the one. And that improvisation became a new part. It's one of those key parts that I love, and it is absolutely a mistake that I just got lucky and got out of. Altogether, Rush managed to encapsulate their progressive, larger-than-life style into a relatively short-length classic song form.
So Warren has asked me to take part in today's video and talk a little bit about some of Alex Lifeson's parts found on Tom Sawyer. Now, I've always been a real big fan of guitar players that have a little bit more going on with their rhythm playing than just stock power chords or major and minor chords. I listened to Alex Lifeson, Andy Summers, and Ty Tabor from King's X. All of those guitar players have something in common, which is they are part of a three-piece, and all of those guitar players employ extended chord voicings to really fill a harmonic space with the lack of a keyboard player within the arena of a three-piece band. Now, I'm a real fan of Alex Lifeson. I really love, as I've said, his use of extended chords as well as his use of chord arpeggios with that thick chorus tone. And Tom Sawyer is a great example of all of these attributes and facets of his playing. Now, when it comes to gear, during this period, Alex Lifeson was still very much using Gibsons, using the 335 and also the Howard Roberts Fusion. And you can see him playing Tom Sawyer on that guitar on the Exit Stage Left video. He was, although experimenting with strats with humbuckers in the bridge. When it came to amplifiers, he was using the Marshall Club and Country combo, but also high watt stacks. And today I am using a high watt model in the Helix. For that lush chorus, although we associate Alex Lifeson with the TC Spatial Expander, which is a fantastic unit, I actually use the plug-in version of that all the time. And I really recommend that any of you guys who are into that kind of guitar sound should definitely check that out for recording guitar. But he used loft choruses during this period. So I'm using a 70s style chorus in front of the high watt model. Just a note about my guitar. I always play Music Man guitar, so I'm using my new Ernie Ball Music Man BFR Axis. So let's have a look at the first rhythm guitar part. This is when the guitar is first introduced, and this is a great example of those extended chord voicings that I was talking about. With that chorus tone, it's such a thick and wide rhythm guitar part. We start off with an E major. Then we have an E9 with a sus4, but the voicing of the chords, all of the notes are very closely stacked together. We then have an A7 sus4. The next chord we have is a D9 sus4. So once again, it's the same shape, all of the voices of the notes very closely stacked together. So it has a very rich and full sound. So run those chords one more time. It really is a very kind of typical sound of his, and for a three-piece band, it just fills so much space. We conclude that section. And then we have a variation with some additional chords, the E, and then a little kind of a D shape of an E, playing a sus4. And then we play that E9 chord, or that E9 sus4, should I say. But then we swap the third and fourth fingers around to give us an A minor 6. Then down to the A7 sus. We add the F sharp on the top. So let's put that variation together. And then we have this climbing arpeggio figure. It's always got that double B in the top there. Then back round. Then down from the C. Beautiful chord voicing. Now on to the next section, and this is another interesting example of Alex's rhythm playing, where he plays the B sus2 chord, but he puts the F sharp in the bass that adds some extra weight. Now there we've got an A with a G in the bass, and according to Alex, he just got that idea from Pete Townsend. Now it's so much like the chord parts that we hear in My Generation. So. And once again, there we have that E5 chord with that double B. All of these chords, like I said, have very rich harmony to them and interesting harmonic content. The next section is pure prog. This is when we're into the section that's in 7. So we're playing over a slightly troublesome time signature. We have this chord arpeggio. Once again, chord arpeggios, adding movement instead of just playing standard blocked power chords. And then we double the moog with this little melodic figure. And again, he's just shifting positions when he plays that line. Now, the guitar solo is based around the E mixolydian mode, and for me, it sounds like this is kind of semi-worked out, semi-improvised. I think he potentially had an idea of what he was playing and where he was playing it, but the erratic nature and the sheer kind of frantic sound of the playing really makes it feel as if it was improvised. There's just a couple of points where we have licks that are doubled with the bass as well as followed by the drums. So there's a couple of key licks that he always jumps to. The first one. And then later we repeat that higher up. Now, the phrasing of that solo is incredibly hard. What I've just played is an approximation of it, you know, trying to get all the correct pinched harmonics and trying to get that feel of playing over the 7 time signature is incredibly demanding. And like I said, for me, it feels as if it was a slightly worked out but improvised solo. But hopefully that little rendition gives you a slight insight as to what was going on.
Okay, so trying to break down Tom Sawyer is a lot. I'm a massive Rush fan, and this song pretty much typifies kind of the peak of their hook writing mixed with prog and massive synths and all that kind of stuff. And the song starts with the iconic big note, which I'm going to play with my foot. And of course, that sounds huge, but that sound comes from the Oberheim OBX. I think it was the OBX, it was either the OB6, OB8, but it was an Oberheim synth with pretty much these settings. I think I could have got a little bit closer if I tried to dial this for a week solid, but it's pretty close. It's that envelope filter going wow. So it's that big sound that catches your ear. So you immediately know as the song starts, it's this. It can't be anything else. No other song has used exactly that sound because that's the Tom Sawyer sound. But actually, it only plays one note as the vocal starts at the intro, and then it drops out and the bass comes in with this kind of... those big chords, and later on in the song it's definitely some sort of chord work there, but Alex Lifeson's guitar is a big wall over the top of it to make it sound huge. Then it switches on the feet to something much more gentle, which is a string synth. I think it's an ARP Selena, like you can see on this screen, but it could have been any of the string synths from that time, and it does this. Which is quite like the Gary Newman Cars kind of top line thing. But when I play the bass line over the top of that, and I'll talk about the tone in a second, we get a much fuller picture underneath the guitars and drums for that. And then it goes into the next hook, which is the picked guitar part underneath that pre-chorus kind of thing. And there, it's huge. But let's talk about the bass tone for a second. This is kind of a modern recreation of the bass tone, because I know that Geddy Lee used pretty much this setup in the late 2000s. It's an Avalon DI, which is capturing this bass pretty purely. And then this is a Tech 21 Landmark. Essentially, it's the Sansamp rack units all tied together. So we get a very distorted tone mixed in with the clean DI. And I think what he was trying to do at the time was fill in a lot of sonic space that having one guitar needed filling in the middle. And so this does that. And Geddy Lee at the time was famous for using a Rickenbacker 4003, although as I believe it was confirmed by Geddy himself that the song was actually recorded on a jazz bass, and that's why this sounds really quite close to the album tone with this really gritty. So it's not exactly 100% there, but again I could tweak that and get even closer. And there's nothing processing that except just a gentle compressor to keep that in line. That's it. Now, over the top, that line that I just played, there is a synth on top in certain sections with that. And then that's another hook in the song because that sticks in your mind. So when they get to the crazy 7/8 bridge solo section thing, the bass is doing pretty much that line with... which is only a couple of notes away from, which is what Alex Lifeson plays to bring the band back in before the crazy drum fills, which are over that iconic chord sequence of... So this song really is hook after hook after hook. Even though the structure's slightly unconventional, the fact that it keeps coming in with these big hooks, or the big bass synth, or the top line, or just different thing after different thing to catch your ear, that, to me, is incredible songwriting condensed right down.
I want to point something out on the drums that a lot of other drummers seem to neglect to point out. And we're not talking about the big drum fill in Tom Sawyer. We could talk about that all day. He's got some really interesting stuff when it comes to that. But what I'm talking about are the first 4 bars in Tom Sawyer. Now, what's interesting here is that Neil actually utilizes some sort of tension and release with the kick drum pattern leading up to the first chorus of Tom Sawyer. Now, while most people might think it's easy to keep consistent 16ths on the hat, it's really actually quite difficult to get the feel because of how he displaces the hi-hat scoops and how he displaces the kick drums. And that's really what made Neil so special with his drumming, was that he was able to complement the other musicians with these small little nuances in his playing. So what's really difficult is to keep that pulse in between the scoops and then have those kick patterns line up so that when the chorus comes in, the band is all together and it has that much more impact. So something like this. What is a real challenge is playing the consistent 16th notes and making it feel good throughout the whole song. Because not only is it physically taxing, but it's actually rather difficult to get the feel down while the hand and foot phrases change throughout the song. So if you're rigid with your right hand on the hats and you try and play it, it's going to look and sound something like this. Right? It's rather difficult. You gotta muscle it, right? So what we need to do is kind of work the hats in and make it kind of breathe and bring new life to how it feels, like this. That seems to be one of the simpler ways to get through it and to make it feel right all the way through the playing. At the ending of measure 4 and the beginning of measure 5 that goes into the chorus, that's where he kind of does that double hi-hat scoop. So he repeats the pattern itself so that the band comes in. And I really like how Neil uses this to that effect, because it's like telling a story. He doesn't come right out the gate playing and giving away all of his chops, right? He builds up towards that momentum into the chorus, and that's really what's going to hook the listener in and draw their interest towards the rhythm section of this music.
Tom Sawyer and the rest of the Moving Pictures album was recorded and mixed at Le Studio in Morin Heights, Quebec, in October and November of 1980. It was produced by the band in conjunction with Terry Brown. Paul Northfield was the engineer on the album. All of the instrumental tracks and vocals on Tom Sawyer were performed by the band. Moving Pictures was released on February the 12th, 1981 by Anthem Records, showcasing Tom Sawyer as the album's opening track. The album hit number 1 on the Canadian charts, number 3 on the US Billboard 200 and the UK album charts. Tom Sawyer was released as a single in June of 1981, and although it did not peak as high on the singles charts as the album, it quickly became a staple of the band's live shows and remains a defining track of classic rock radio. In addition to its lasting musical legacy, Tom Sawyer has become a prominent fixture of popular culture, with now iconic appearances in television shows and films such as Futurama, The Goldbergs, I Love You Man, and The Waterboy. Its pop culture crossover appeal has encouraged the writers of South Park to collaborate with Rush to write an introduction scene which the band would show on screens before performances of the song on their 2006 live tour. In the scene projected on the Jumbotrons, the South Park characters would attempt to play the songs before breaking into a fight, after which the members of Rush would emerge onto the live show stage to show them how it's done.
A modern day warrior, mean means right. Today's Tom Sawyer, mean pride.
VH1 named Tom Sawyer the 19th greatest hard rock song of all time in 2009, and in 2010, it was inducted into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame, along with 4 other Rush classics. The band's legacy has likewise continued throughout the years, never taking itself too seriously, as evidenced from their famous appearance on the Colbert Report in 2009.
You're known for some sort of long songs. Have you ever written a song so epic that by the end of the song, you were actually being influenced by yourself at the beginning of the song? Because it happened so much earlier in your career?
In the midst of their light-hearted humour, they have earned some very serious recognition. In 1996, they were inducted as Officers of the Order of Canada. And in 2013, Rush was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The tragic and surprising passing of Neil Peart to cancer in 2020 ended the future of Rush. Lee and Lifeson have stated that Rush cannot continue without their incredible bandmate, although they continue to remain friends and are open to future collaborations and partnerships. Wow, what can I say about Rush? This is huge. When I was 15, 16 and first playing guitar, my first band, as it were, was me and Stephen Collins. Stephen, if you're watching, hi. And Stephen had a Maxwin drum kit. Do you remember Maxwin? They were like the Pearl Export cheaper version. So they were like the beginner's, Pearl kit. It's called a Maxwin. I think it was orange sparkly color. Great kit. And I had my guitar that my dad had made with me, more like for me. And I had my FOW amp, my little bass amp that I had my guitar plugged into, with my Colesborough Suzz distortion pedal. And we used to do covers of Rush. I remember learning Trees. I remember learning Tom Sawyer. And we played them really badly, but we were passionate. The thing I can say about Rush is they crossed all kinds of divides. So yeah, I was into Queen as a kid. They were my favorite band, still are. Got into the Beatles, went back to the Beatles and the Stones and Zeppelin. Pink Floyd were huge in my life. Obviously 1980, The Wall comes out. These are huge, huge things. But I was also into new wave and punk and post-punk. And that's the thing about Rush. Stephen, for instance, hello again, Stephen, his favorite bands were the Ramones and Rush. For real. His 2 favorite bands were the Ramones and Rush. And that speaks to Rush. It doesn't matter. You can be a punk rock fan. There's nothing wrong with Rush. I think there is a complexity in their music, yes, but there's also a simplicity to it. It gets to the point. You don't listen to a Rush song and think that they just put a riff in there for the sake of it. So much progressive rock, especially the more modern stuff, often, and I'll put this up for discussion, feels like a guitar player went and wrote a really complicated riff and brought it to the band. The drummer had a really complicated idea, brought it to the band. The bass player, the keyboard player, and they all came in and they stick it together. It doesn't feel like that with Rush. Rush feels like they're writing songs. And it feels like that 7/8 or 4/4 and 3/4 bars in the song are just there because that's the riff that sounded cool. It doesn't seem like they sat there and went, what mode should we use? Should we do this in an odd meter timing? The cleverness in there is just built around musicality. I think by not limiting themselves to either one of a dogma of thinking that they had to be clever or a dogma of thinking something had to be disposable and pop, they just created something unbelievably unique. I think Queen at their best did that as well. Bohemian Rhapsody is that. Bohemian Rhapsody is a masterpiece of things that don't work together. But when you put them together, they did work together. And that seems to be Rush. They wrote a pop song, meaning a popular song, a song that you can sing along with. They have some complex musical ideas in there, but nothing that ever disappears up its own butt and just sounds like it's completely self-indulgent twiddle or twaddle. There's something about Rush that transcends genres in so many ways. I remember the first time I heard Spirit of the Radio. I mean, what a great, great song. My hairs are standing on end. And the first time I heard Tom Sawyer was just like what is this music? This is perfect for me. I like Queen. I like all this different stuff. It just brings it together. Rush were that band. And I love how in popular culture, like when they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, wasn't it Dave Grohl? I'm forgetting. Wasn't it Dave Grohl that inducted them in and got up and played? That's the point. You got somebody from a punk rock background, loves Rush. Like I said, my best friend when I was a kid, we were both 15 years old, struggling to play our instruments for the first time. He was a better drummer than me, though, than I was a guitarist. He'd been playing a little longer. 2 favorite bands, Ramones and Rush. I think that sums it up. Thanks ever so much for watching. You all rock. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, dos vidania, tschüss, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir. Leave some other comments and questions below. Let us know other bands that you want us to feature, other songs. Thank you ever so much for watching.